So let me get this straight. You put the lime in the coconut, then you drank them both up? No, you've got it all wrong. It's the lime, then the coconut, then you... Oh my god. Yeah, call me in the morning. What? Where do I start? Hit me. You're late, you're smoking inside, on the clock, you're not even dressed. I am dressed. No, you're not. Am too. Look. Oh. Well, I'll be damned, you are dressed. Go brush your teeth. Hi, I'm Abby, I have a lot of records, and this is Vinyl Monday. So welcome back, or welcome if this is your first time here. Vinyl Monday is the who, what, when, where, why, and how do I feel about classic albums in my collection. If TV show length episodes aren't your thing, don't worry. I also do Vinyl Monday in 60 seconds here on my channel, over on my Instagram, as well as TikTok. In case you missed it and were wondering where I was last week, the Vinyl Monday schedule has officially changed. I am now 3 weeks on, 1 week off. It's better for you as not to get bored, it's better for me to improve the quality of the series and do fun new stuff, and it's better for the mid-season special next week. Holy hell, I cannot believe we are almost halfway through this mess of a season. Save for Zeppelin 3, Trout Mask, and Miles Davis, everything after Hot Rats has felt like a blur. In my absence here, I made my radio debut. For International Women's Day, my friend and podcast host Emma and I were DJ Flower Power's guests on the Hippie Hour out of Burlington, Vermont. If you missed its airing on Friday, that's no problem. The show is archived on Mixcloud and linked in my description. Thank you so much for having us, Trish. It was a blast sharing music and sitting with a like-minded individual spotlighting worthy and talented ladies. Also, the latest episode of the Dolls podcast went live. I wrote this episode for Tammy Terrell. I first learned of her while researching Marvin Gaye's What's Going On and was extremely affected by her story. Tammy's life had just as much triumph as tragedy, and I hope this episode could do her story justice. The Dolls Pod is available wherever you stream your podcasts, but as always, Apple and Spotify are linked in the description. On to this week's album. Man, it is a relief to be covering a single LP pop album after altogether too many double albums or otherwise avant-garde shit at once. This week's album is Harry Nilsson Schmilsson. Congrats if you guessed this one. Remember, if you want to play along, all you gotta do is check out my posts tab. That's where I post hints to what the next album is gonna be, I make announcements, I host polls, you can find all of that on my channel. And if you so choose, you can always read the written version of this review on my website, abigaildevoe.com. Again, if you missed it, we changed names. That is linked in the description. Alright, let's take the plastic off. So my copy is an original. The cover's seen better days, but I think that adds to its charm. The vinyl itself is one of those RCA Dynaflex discs. Does anyone else have a lot of trouble keeping the Dynaflex specifically clean? Like, I have no problem keeping everything else pretty dust-free. I don't know what it is, but my Hunky Dory and this get way dirtier than anything else in my collection. But enough of that. Let's talk about this cover art. The Nilsson Schmilsson cover was photographed by Dean Torrance. Harry's looking worse for wear. He's in his robe. He looks like he's just rolled out of bed at 1 p.m. or 1 a.m. I'm not sure. Harry's holding his pipe, which we get a better look at on the poster. B-roll Abby will be showing you this, I'm sure. I'm always grateful to find an album with the poster still intact. Many of these were lost to time. On the back cover, we have our track listing, credits, credits, and Harry's fridge left wide open. On Nilsson Schmilsson, we of course have the man of the hour, the one, the only Mr. Harry Nilsson, taking charge of all of the vocals, as well as playing keys and mellotron and serving as principal songwriter. He's backed by Chris Spedding and John Uribe on guitar, Klaus Voormann and Herbie Flowers on bass. Klaus contributes guitar as well, future one-hit wonder Gary Wright on piano and organ, and Jim Keltner and Jim Gordon on drums. Special guests include 3 Rolling Stones associates, Jim Price playing trumpet and trombone, man there's a lot of Jims on this album, Bobby Keys on sax, and Paul Buckmaster writing the string and horn arrangements of Without You. Nilsson Schmilsson was produced by Richard Perry. Roll transition. The old adage, "it takes a decade to be an overnight success," is getting thrown around in reference to the mainstream breakthroughs of my favorite pop girlies. For today's subject, it didn't quite take 10 years, it took 7 albums for Harry Nilsson to become an overnight success. By the end of the 1960s, Harry was primarily known as a songwriter. He'd given his stuff to the Monkees.
You're not the only cuddly toy that was ever enjoyed. Years ago I knew a boy. He was his daddy's pride and joy.
The Turtles.
Rock and roll music.
Three Dog Night.
One is the loneliest number that you
And Mary Hopkin.
Dreams are nothing more than wishes, and a wish is just a dream.
This is what he built his reputation on. In Noel Murray's review of the Who is Harry Nilsson and Why is Everybody Talking About Him doc, highly recommend, he said, quote, "In an era of inventive, knowledgeable songwriters like Brian Wilson, John Lennon, Van Dyke Parks, and Randy Newman, Nilsson became the musician's musician, admired for his crazy arrangements and his insistence on satisfying his own muse before making his record label happy." It's true. Harry's chops got him in good with the Beatles. He was especially close to Ringo and John. John called him his, quote, favorite American band. Also true, Harry's first 2 albums flopped. Critically acclaimed, but commercially ignored, as put by Jeff Giles. Ironically, Harry's biggest hit so far is a cover. He sang Fred Neil's Everybody's Talkin' for the Midnight Cowboy soundtrack, beating out the likes of Joni Mitchell and Bob Dylan for that coveted theme song spot. It was Harry's first top 10 hit, it won him a Grammy, and he's been steadily on the come up since. He did visual album The Point, which is practically begging for a joint film and soundtrack review, and instead of just reprinting his old stuff, he made one of the first ever remix albums, reimagining Pandemonium Shadow Show and Aerial Ballet. The former I would sell my soul to have a copy of. Sessions for the latter produced a song that, despite Ballet having been released twice, hadn't made it on either version.
gotta get up, gotta get out, gotta get home before the morning comes.
As if that wasn't enough, Harry's got a lot going on right now. He's on the hook to film a BBC special, which he'd already deferred twice. His own production company has gone to shit, and he's become a father for the first time. The constant push and pull between fatherhood, work, and going out on the town has kept him from writing new material. Except for Coconut. Harry loved the word coconut so much he wrote an entire story song around it. When RCA gives him the nudge saying it's time to record the next, Harry turns up at the home of Tiny Tim's producer. Harry and Richard Perry met about a year before when Tiny Tim played the troubadour. Harry was a fan of Tim's and Richard liked Pandemonium Shadow Show. Of course, both were fans of the Beatles. According to Nilsson, The Life of a Singer-Songwriter, Richard got the idea that Harry could be the next Beatles, the American Beatles. Now, where have we seen that before? Richard said yes to producing on one condition. He was to have complete artistic control. And Harry agreed. for now. As demos of Driving Along, Moonbeam Song, and Down took shape, Harry's leaned away from Baroque pop and towards rock and roll. Meanwhile, an Apple Records act are trucking along despite the truly absurd amount of setbacks they faced. It would be comical if it weren't so damn sad. I forgot to take it out. Give me a second, I need to get my Badfinger. Badfinger were on tour in the States promoting Magic Christian music, and mostly its hit single, Come and Get It, which they were so sick of they stopped playing. They were so unbelievably done with the whole Beatles thing at this point, I don't blame them. 6 weeks into that tour, they released the follow-up, No Dice. It got better reviews than Magic Christian Music. It was their first honest-to-goodness record as Badfinger, if we're talking about the whole Ivies thing, and it got more attention in the States like they planned. On that album is a seemingly innocuous collab between Pete Ham and Tom Evans. Pete and his lady Beverly, well, ex-lady now, Pete met his new lady on this tour. They got in a tiff over a party. They were supposed to go, but Tom wanted Pete to stay back and work on a song with him. Beverly let Pete go work, but she wasn't happy about it. Quote, "Your lips are smiling, but your eyes are not," he said. Or, "You always smile, but in your eyes your sorrow shows." To my knowledge, Tom didn't get in a fight with his lady, he was just in his feels, you know how it is, and he wrote I Can't Live. Put the chorus of one song and the verses of another together and you get Badfinger's recording is a lot more of a power ballad. They wanted to do it bigger and take it in the straight ballad direction. Pete said, quote, "That was the way we wanted to do it, but never had the nerve." Now this is the story everyone knows. One night, Harry Nilsson was at a party in Laurel Canyon and he heard this song. He'd never heard it before, but he was instantly besotted with it. The melody was great. He called his friends in the morning asking about it, but no one knew what the hell he was talking about. Everyone was drunk and high, nobody remembered the song. So he turns to his record collection and record stores, scouring obscure Beatles bootlegs, but he can't find the song. Is it Grapefruit? No dice. Finally, after humming the melody in passing, someone mentioned Badfinger. Upon hearing it sober, Harry fell in love with it all over again. He simply had to record Without You. Quote, "I called Richard Perry, who was supposed to be producing my album, and I said, look, I've found this song, I think it's a #1, you've got to hear it." He came over and heard it and said, "God, I think you're right. It's a killer." Early in the Morning and I'll Never Leave You were cut first in California. Harry's son was just born and not old enough to travel. Once he was old enough, in June of '71, Harry trucked out to Trident Studios in London for Nilsson Schmilsson sessions. There, Richard assembled a band. Rick Wakeman of Yes was around, Beatle associate Klaus Voormann was too. Lou Reed's bassist Herbie Flowers was in town, and they caught Jim Gordon right after wrapping Derek and the Dominoes tour. Maybe the weirdest match of all was Chris Spedding of Nucleus. I cannot escape jazz fusion no matter how hard I try. Richard said, quote, "I knew Harry had the ability, certainly the vocal ability as well as the songwriting ability, to do something that could take him to another level. I knew that the one thing missing from the equation in terms of truly making him as close to an American Beatles as possible was to do the album in the UK." But their first crack at Without You did not work. The original key was too high, Rick Wakeman's keys were too much, Harry hated the string arrangement, and the more they worked on it, the less sure he was about having it on the album. Richard remembers, quote, "Like two proper gentlemen, we decided to have a meeting over high tea at the Dorchester Hotel to discuss what we were going to do." I don't know what that was. And I said, "Harry, you do remember that when you came to me and asked me to produce you, my only condition was that I have control?" And he looks at me dead in the face and says, "Well, I lied." They reached a compromise. The string arrangement stayed, but Rick Wakeman was swapped out for Gary Wright. It took a little more convincing to coax Harry back in front of the mic, but when he was, As the story goes, he knocked out the melody and harmony in one take each. Nilsson Schmilsson's third cover of Shirley and Lee's Let the Good Times Roll was a lot less thought out. It was a completely spur-of-the-moment decision to record it, then took 50 takes to get down. According to Chris Spedding, Gotta Get Up was rehearsed and recorded to death. On the other hand, Driving Along, Moonbeam, and Down weren't polished into fully formed songs until they were in the studio. Richard would take the fragment, make a whole song out of it, then Harry would go teach it to the guys, then, once it was time for him to cut his vocals, he'd have about 15 minutes to sit down and write some lyrics. As Richard described, this provided structure to the sessions. He had no alternative, he was forced to do it. We had to do the vocals, and we had to move on. Now, who was there at Trident while the guys were working on the final mix but fucking Badfinger working on Straight Up? Harry sent someone out to get food and drinks. He invited Badfinger in for a bite to eat and to listen. They'd never met before this. According to Harry, quote, "We turned the lights down and played the song full blast. Then we turned the lights up and they were just looking at each other. Then at us, then back at each other. They were stunned." Pete Ham especially was thrilled. Roadie Ian Ferguson remembers him rushing back into their studio space saying, "There's some guy down the hall doing one of our songs, and it sounds amazing!" The track listing of Nilsson Schmilsson goes as follows. Opening up side 1, we have Gotta Get Up, followed by Driving Along. Then, Early in the Morning, next, the Moonbeam song, and side 1 closes with Down. Opening up side 2, we have Without You, followed by Coconut. Then, Let the Good Times Roll, next, Jump into the Fire, and the album closes with I'll Never Leave You. Nilsson Schmilsson was released in October of 1971 in tandem with Jefferson Airplane's Bark and David Bowie's Hunky Dory. By album number 7, finally, Harry Nilsson caught on with the masses. Critic David Proctor liked Harry's earlier works, but called Nilsson Schmilsson, quote, less intellectual. The immaculate production by Richard Perry is there, the top session men are there, Nilsson's delicate multi-tracked voice is there, and the album is fun to listen to. But is that all? In this case, I think it is. But David Proctor was the outlier. At last, audiences and critics alike were on the same page about Harry. Even notorious grouch Robert Christgau gave Nilsson Schmilsson an A. Now that he was so famous, Harry really couldn't get out of that BBC special a third time. Harry agreed he'd do it, but it wouldn't be live. There wouldn't be an audience. Please don't make me play in front of an audience. I have terrible stage fright. Ooh, and I also want us to push the boundaries of filming technology by blue screening 2 other Harrys in with me. And I also want to use this scene from Citizen Kane that will cost a fucking fortune to get the rights to. Can we do that? Oh, and I also want you to pie me. Trust me, it'll be great. Nilsson in Concert was filmed in a BBC theatre with canned audience cheers edited in between songs. An Evening with Harry Nilsson was broadcast for the first time just after midnight on New Year's Day 1972, the first broadcast of the new year. If this is any indication, he would have been a fantastic live act. RCA ordered a whopping 3 singles from Nilsson Schmilsson: Without You, backed with Gotta Get Up, a shortened Jump into the Fire, backed with Moonbeam, and Coconut, backed with Down. Without You hit number 1 on the Billboard singles chart the week of February 19th, 1972, and won him his 2nd Grammy. Nilsson Schmilsson was nominated for Album of the Year. We never talk about Album of the Year noms here, but lost out to the Concert for Bangladesh. The double-edged irony of Without You being Harry's greatest hit is not lost on me. There is the obvious, a songwriter by trade being known for his covers. Then there's Badfinger's only number 1 hit being someone else covering their song. When they vowed, after turning down Marianne with the Shaky Hand, that if they were going to have a hit, it would be their song. They got their wish. Pete was so grateful. Quote, Nilsson showed us what can be done with our material. He gave it the treatment and got it to so many people. Tom agreed. Nilsson's version really showed what you can do with a song, production-wise, and with a good singer. It blew me away. Now, Harry really wanted to cover Badfinger again, but Richard wasn't keen on it. I'm unsure if Badfinger ever considered covering Harry back, but they would have sounded great doing it. Harry and Richard worked together once more for Nilsson Schmilsson's follow-up, Son of Schmilsson. Just as good of material as the former, but it underperformed commercially. Recordings were even more star-studded than the last, featuring the likes of Peter Frampton, Ringo, and George Harrison. But this recording process went very differently. So why couldn't Harry ever quite follow up Nilsson Schmilsson? He refused to. There is the matter of upholding artistic integrity and all. He created art on his own terms and no one else's. That's part of why he never toured. He wanted to prove you didn't have to. But from what I've read and heard from Harry's friends and loved ones, he had what we might call nowadays imposter syndrome. He self-sabotaged several times in his career, and as Noel Murray stated, he was also everyone's favorite drinking buddy, which was his ultimate undoing. While Richard Perry kept Nilsson Schmilsson sessions mostly sober and serious, the nightlife was not. Trident was in the middle of Soho with pubs and nightclubs all around. Though Harry was a wine and tequila guy, having pints of beer readily available at all hours of the day and night really wasn't good for him. He had a family history of alcoholism. He brought this lifestyle back to the States, and by the mid-70s, he was completely out of control. His drinking wrecked his voice, wrecked his marriage, and completely derailed his career trajectory. Una Nilsson, man, she is an angel on earth. She saved Harry's life. If not for Una Nilsson, I don't think Harry would have stayed around to turn his career around. Harry was able to go on and do some really cool things through the 80s. He wrote a musical. He teamed up with Van Dyke Parks to soundtrack the So Bad It's Good Popeyes, starring Robin Williams and Shelley Duvall. Coconut was featured in Quentin Tarantino's Reservoir Dogs.
Right in front of us there. I think it's been following me all morning. Get the f*** out of it. What are you...
But Without You is still Harry's greatest hit. Travis Wall choreographed a routine to it for So You Think You Can Dance. The chokehold this show had on us in the late 2000s should be studied. It was even in a run of Gain commercials a few years back. I do get a kick out of Rolling Stone describing Without You as, quote, like a depressed Barry Manilow. But the review ultimately gives Harry his flowers, concluding he, quote, could shruggingly pull off anything he wanted. Nilsson Schmilsson is ranked 281 on the most recent iteration of the 500 Greatest Albums of All Time list, between Frank Sinatra's In the Wee Small Hours and 50 Cent! Oh my god, I finally have the opportunity to drop some peak Abigail DeVoe lore. My dad worked on the sprinklers at 50 Cent's MTV Cribs mansion. You do not get any more context, you do not get any more details. What do I think of Nilsson Schmilsson?
Now let me get this straight. Put the lime in the coconut, you drank board up. Put the lime in the coconut, you drank.
Going in. Time and time again, Harry Nilsson defies categorization. He had a crooner's voice, but he wasn't a pop singer. He was a master of the craft, but he was much more than a pop writer. He flew in the Laurel Canyon crowd, but he didn't belong to Laurel Canyon, really. He was New York, California, and London all at once. He advocated for gun control, just the same as he drunkenly belched on a record, tried to name an album Strange Pussies, made an awful vampire movie with Keith Moon and Ringo Starr. He could write a blues song about his father leaving and cover 15 Beatles songs at once on the same side of an album. He based an entire project around a pun and grappled with God by writing about a desk. And that's exactly what draws me to him. That's just Harry. In the biography I listened to for this episode, Richard Perry emphasized sequencing. He put a lot of thought into the running order of Nilsson Schmilsson. You don't get a much more fitting opener than a song about waking up late and rushing out the door in the morning. What's so brilliant about Harry and Richard's work together is how illustrative it is. Harry makes you feel exactly what he wants you to feel, with little more than an inflection. Likewise, Richard uses production to drive the feeling. Take Harry's opening piano chords. On the demo, they're freer, like this. On the album version, they're rigid, straight, and loud, like an alarm rousing you from deep sleep. The instrumental slowly comes to around Harry. The guitar hits the 3, with rhythmic fills that unspool themselves to take up whole measures. The drums and the bass put the punch in. Hokier instruments are gradually introduced. We don't even notice the horn section until the refrain. I bet you didn't notice the accordion until the verse about the sailor. It comes in way back on the first verse. It's rare that I cover a voice that could easily handle all of this instrumental stuff on this series. Harry's could. He had that theatricality and classic crooner's tone to pull it off. Why is Gotta Get Up such an earworm? There's structural fluidity about the lyrics. Every phrase leads right into the next line. Gotta get home before the morning comes. What if I'm late? Got a big day. Gotta get home before the sun comes up. Up and away. Got a big day. Sorry I can't stay. That's Earworm 101. It allows Harry to play with the rhythm. He can do that goofy hip swiveling and actually make it work. Harry's songwriting revolved around his worldview. He was the kind of guy to pour a drink while the sky's falling. Though we're not quite at the levels of writing a song about washing your dick off after you visit a brothel. Gotta Get Up tests the waters with its raunchiness. He'd come to town and he would pound her for a couple of days, and then he'd sail across the buoy waves. The final chorus loosens up with the tambourine, despite trumpets doot-dooting away. His sense of humor spills into the other players with that zany, wind-up toy outro. Gotta Get Up is like waking up to the post-60s hangover. All the hippies cutting their hair and having to wake up in the morning to go to their big boy jobs. Of course, the song about being late for work is followed up by the one about the morning commute. Driving Along has easy mid-tempo acoustic guitar, and of course, a stalled engine sound effect. Perky, folksy, and quirky, Driving Along reminds me of something George Harrison would have done in the late 70s. As far as lyrics go, it's sparse after the first verse. You can tell this was one of the songs Harry and company slammed together in the studio. Restriction breeds innovation, but the only really innovative moments are the trippy echo-plexing on Harry's voice through the outro. The verse is where the key moves up from C to D major, and the bridge does the opposite, stepping down from C to B flat. I really wish these attention grabbers were used to better effect. There are some weird moments lyrically. My ability to gel with a song about an existential crisis on your morning commute has been completely thrown off by Driving Along at 57,000 miles an hour. Look at those people standing on the petals of a flower. Are we sure Harry wasn't still tripping when he hit the road this morning? But a lyrical clunker gives way to one of the sharpest tools in Harry's box. His wordplay. Look at those pedals bumping for a little bit of power. This fades right into Harry's cover of Early in the Morning. After a couple songs of 70s vocal pop excess, it's delightful to hear just Harry and the organ. Equal parts cheeky and lonesome, Early in the Morning is a tale of what a guy gets up to after he storms out on his girl after an argument. After he's turned away by both her friend and her folks, he ends up in the care of his waitress at a diner. It's a totally different side from Harry the showman. You can hear Harry's fingertips on the keys, and how he ekes out everything he can out of his falsetto. He's just on the verge of being out of breath before hitting us with the turnaround. Even in this quaint environment, he vamps on Ain't Got Nothing But the Ain't Got Nothing But the Ain't Got Nothing But the Blues. We go from a lonely night to a romantic one with the schmaltzy Moonbeam song. Though I don't know what the hell it's about. Trash blown by a wind beam who searches for the moonbeam who was last seen looking at the tracks is some confounding image. It really doesn't matter what it's about. Do we really want the lyrics to be sticking out from behind the actor's dialogue when we're watching a romance scene in a movie? But really, Harry was one of those writers who indulged in the act of piecing words together because they sounded nice. It produces some truly wild moments. See, on a fence with a bit of crap around its bottom. He let our brains fill in the pictures. Knowing the showstopper that's up first on the next side of this disc is affecting my perception of this side's closer. Again, Down is unusually lyrically sparse for a known writer like Harry. If anything, it's a good showcase for the less pristine side of his voice, and a fine culmination of the energy side one has built. We start full blast with Gotta Get Up, pull back through Driving Along until Early in the Morning is completely bare, then bring it up a bit through Moonbeam and this. A while back, I called Black Sabbath's Paranoid the most front-loaded album of all time. Nilsson Schmilsson might be a candidate for the most back-loaded of all time. While all in all, side 1 showcases the full spectrum of Harry's ability, in comparison to side 2, it's bland. Without You is anything but bland. It demands a visceral reaction. Even the piano is moved. Those chords sound like they're weeping. Harry's strength as a performer was obviously his voice. At his peak, his voice was always right. He's feather light on the verses, using tender inflections instead of volume to emote. It's because he had to preserve his voice for later in the song. He was a belter too. The gut behind the first Can't Live If Living Is Without You, as if to sing through a grimace. It's hard to imagine how to pull back from that, but production does the heavy lifting. It leaves chorus Harry alone in the theater, his voice reverberating for but a moment before returning to No, I Can't Forget This Evening or Your Face As You Were Leaving. Where Bad Fingers Without You feels like a tiff with your lover, Harry's Without You feels like a relationship-ending argument. The drama is there. In his recent Tate McRae review, of all things, Swiftologist identified something I've been grasping at for years. It answered my question of, in our year of the Lord 2025, why does the harmony vocal feel special? Because, as Swiftologist observed, modern pop music is afraid of the harmony vocal. Everything is just one track now, and it sounds blah. Harry's harmony is just jaw-dropping. It sweeps in at, and now it's only fair that I should let you know what you should know. The two parts dance, they never touch but are always in sync. Harry's second strength was that he was a brilliant interpreter of both his own material and others. Without You could be a song for a lost love, the same as it could be for a childhood friend who passed away. For a moment there, I thought, oh, for Harry to have recorded this while his marriage was falling apart, that's so beautiful! Then I listened to Son of Schmilsson.
You're breaking my heart. You're tearing it apart. So f*** you.
Oh, so that's how we feel. But it's not all on the artist to be a master interpreter. Every actor needs a stage. This is where Paul Buckmaster comes in. He was responsible for Moonlight Mile, Space Oddity, Tiny Dancer, You're So Vain, even Drops of Jupiter. He might be rock and roll's greatest composer because he's not just the master of the heartrending swell. He knows how to let it happen. Just before the final chorus, everything pulls back so the drum can come rushing in. The force of impact is Harry tearing himself open on that impossibly high belt. The harmony is even higher. A completely no-holds-barred performance. Passion like that has rarely been expressed on record before or since. And to follow that up with the funny coconut song. That's it. That's Harry right there, undercutting the vulnerability with a punchline, cracking a joke at a funeral. That's why I love Harry Nilsson. Coconut was far from the first white guy adopting a Caribbean accent in a politically dodgy manner.
Well, I'm loading the banana boats all night long.
And it was far from the last.
Do you see banana man?
Somehow, Coconut is one of the least offensive. Do you have any idea how much inherent charisma it takes to pull a song like this off? It's all one chord for starters, C7, I think. There might be a C7 over G in there as well. And it's still the catchiest song known to man. You'll see what I mean. After we're done here today, you'll be going about your daily life singing, she put the lime in the coconut, she drank them both up. She put the lime in the coconut, you drank them both up. You put the lime in the coconut, you drank them both up. You put the lime. The voices are just ridiculous, getting more hysterical as the song goes on. You have to be comfortable with taking the piss out of yourself in order to do that. I find it pretty funny how Nilsson biographies try to make this more than what it is, a philosophical statement about the problem is the solution or whatever. Call Coconut what it is. It's a joke song about curing a hangover. Even the song feels drunk with the wooden percussion and the dinky triangle. The master interpreter comes back for the vaudeville-tinged Let the Good Times Roll. I always thought this was his song. His voice is so well suited to this style. Once again, the harmony vocal shines. If his BBC special was any indication, the only thing better than one Harry is 3. If you think we've heard it all, how about a 7-minute jam session? It busts my expectations of not just the man of the hour, but his normally tight and controlled sidemen. Another genius transition from track to track. Let the Good Times Roll is stopped abruptly by what I thought was a preset on a synth. It turns out to be Herbie Flowers setting the groove for Jump Into the Fire. Herbie slowly detuning his bass was him just goofing around. He had a good laugh, and so do we, over both the Moment and Bass Player magazines asking him about this for decades to come. Alan Shipton described Harry's heavily affected voice as a, quote, shattered chandelier of sound, fragments of voice darting in every direction like an oral kaleidoscope. This song is the most fun to listen to on plein air, or just with a stereo system. It sounds like Harry has sucked so much helium he's
whizzing about the room.
We have kind of a bizarre closer with I'll Never Leave You, though the arrangement is gorgeous. It's kind of mismatched to the song. And after the emotional roller coaster of this album, I can't get a read on this song's intention. Is it a genuine expression of love? There are nods to epic love songs in the lyrics. This river's far too deep without you. This river's far too wide without you. That lends themselves to this interpretation? Or do we take into account the context of Harry Nilsson and take this song as a bitter jab? Who's to say? Whatever it is that has me so turned around on this song, it's intriguing. Again, an emotional roller coaster. What have we learned from this seemingly innocuous pop album? Number 1, nothing is ever as simple as it seems. And number 2, if there's anyone I'd want to invite to a dinner party, living or dead, it's Harry Nilsson. Nilsson Schmilsson is both a picture of the potential Harry could never fully realize and that expectation that Harry would never live up to. What was that expectation exactly? Easy. Make Nilsson Schmilsson too. And whether out of spite or the drive to always be doing something different, Harry was never gonna give them Nilsson Schmilsson too. What endears this album and its leading man to me is that the only through line is the man himself. His voice, his versatility, his command of the word, his sense of humor, his ability to cry laughing, it's all Harry. This album is an unabashedly full expression of both Harry's personality and incredible musical ability. It beckons with one hand and shoos you away with the other, and I feel right at home in this in-between. Nilsson Schmilsson is music for us sad clowns. My personal favorites off this one are Gotta Get Up, Without You, Coconut, Let the Good Times Roll, and I'll Never Leave You. Remember, if you want to keep up with all of my favorites from all of the Vinyl Mondays, I have a Spotify playlist linked in my description. I update it every week. And that's it! That is Nilsson Schmilsson. What do you think of this album? What do you think of Harry Nilsson? Leave a comment letting me know. I love hearing what you guys have to say about albums that I love. And remember, despite what some guy on the internet says, Your opinion matters. If you like what I do here, you should like this video and subscribe to my channel. I post new episodes of Vinyl Monday, Monday mornings at 11, and a new episode of the Dolls podcast every other Friday at noon. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next week for the mid-season special. Bye!